Wellpod at DC on Riot Radio.
From meditation, stress management, safer substance use, and sexual health, we will literally talk sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Join us to dive deep into some student health questions. We'll learn about wellness together, try some coping tools, and meet some interesting people.
Your co-hosts, Heather and Craig.
Perfect blend of Campus Health and Wellness Center and SALS.
Each week, we'll DIY a wellness tool together.
And then nerd out and dig into the science behind how it works.
Email your health and wellness related questions to wellpod@durhamcollege.ca to be discussed anonymously on air. Welcome to the Wellpod at DC.
Welcome to the Wellpod at DC, live from the Media Hub on riotradio.ca. I work all night, I work all day to pay the bills I have to pay.
Ain't it sad?
And still, there never seems to be a single penny left for me.
That's too bad.
In 1971, ABBA sang about money, 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 but for many of us, finances and budgets aren't so funny, nor always sunny these days. A 2023 study by Evan Ripley McNeil at the University of Windsor explored student financial well-being and its links to health behaviors and social participation, discussing how finances are a significant worriment for many students. Research on financial well-being is finding an interplay between feeling secure about finances and higher levels of happiness and engagement. On the other side of the toonie, more than half of Canadians are reporting finances as their leading cause of stress, impacting sleep, self-esteem, physical health, relationships, and performance. Often underrepresented in conversations around overall health and well-being, financial wellness is a vital component for student well-being. No matter the size of your bank account, the relationship you have with money can affect every facet of your life. This week's student question is, everything is so expensive for paying for school. How do I manage it all financially? I feel like I need 3 jobs in addition to school to make this all work. Today, we're going to be exploring financial wellness, financial resources, and have a little bit of fun with some finances. Craig, you brought a guest with you today.
I do. Today we have Celeste, our Durham College's manager of financial aid and I'm missing a word. Awards.
Yes.
Sorry,
An important part.
An important part, yes. All the free stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we're going to chat about, as you said, financial wellness, financial literacy. It's Financial Literacy Month this month.
It is. November is Financial Literacy Month.
Yeah, and so we'll chat a little bit about that, but I thought I'd start with what financial wellness means, just as a slightly different word there of...
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It's so important, and oftentimes I think financial wellness is overlooked as part of wellness in general. And one of the main things that I wanted to highlight to begin, I think, was the difference between financial wellness and financial literacy. Because it's so easy to say, you should make your credit card payments on time, and that makes you financially literate, but does it really? So I think the nuance between the two is something that we should discuss and kind of lay out there. So financial wellness is really just, a rough measurement of how well you're implementing the different practices and habits to make you feel financially well. So when we think of exercising, eating well, those are all habits that you can practice to reach an overarching goal to help improve the quality of your life. So this is also where the financial wellness comes into play. The financial literacy piece is the tools and resources and concepts that you can kind of put into practice in order to manage your money better. So I wanted to touch a little bit on the 4 different elements of financial wellness that oftentimes we don't necessarily see people talking about. They don't know the difference. So the first piece being managing your short-term finances. So that's things like making a budget. And we'll talk a little bit about, from a post-secondary vantage point, what does that look like? Because, sometimes we hear in the financial aid office, how do you budget when you don't have enough money? What does that look like? So that's a common piece that we would hear. And we'll talk a little bit about that So the first piece, managing short-term finances, making your budget. The second element being managing your long-term finances, so making room for those long-term goals. What does that look like? And the third piece, present financial freedom. So that's like seeing the numbers next to your habits and then making adjustments. So sometimes we don't necessarily realize how much we're spending on things. I know in preparation for coming to meet with you guys today, I was kind of looking, reflecting on my own financial wellness and how that might relate to some of the conversations that we could have. And I was devastated to see how much money that I was spending just on like day-to-day Tim Hortons in the SSB, getting my Tim Hortons. So I brought like a really cool, actually I'll give one to each of you and you can kind of have a look. So on here, if I was spending $4 a day on my tea and muffin, actually it might even be more than that. Say it's $5 a day. In 1 week, that would be $35, but in 20 years, that would be $36,000.
Oh my goodness.
So that's just a tea and a muffin, right? So if you're spending $5 less a day, that's $1,800 more a year. So we're talking tuition.
Yeah.
Essentially. So if you think of it that way, it's a little bit more, you can kind of put perspective onto what your values are and how that aligns with how you're managing your money.
And do you know what makes me think of, Celeste?
Yeah.
Is it's easier, I find, today in some senses with everything being digital. We have bank account app right on our phone, but I don't really look at it, like you said, all the time. But when I was younger, I had a little book at the bank where I'd go in and the teller would kind of stamp it.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's making me feel very old, but I had a little bit more of awareness because I'd take out my little pocketbook. But even though technology is supposed to be making things easier, I'm not checking the budget and the ins and outs as frequently as you mentioned.
Yeah, and that's, you know what, that's a great way to kind of segue into the other pieces, because you talked a little bit about the relationship with money. And this is something that I don't think people do enough. And I was thinking about it. And just for context, I was a really young single parent, so my relationship with money has kind of changed. So there's not really a snapshot of what your relationship with money looks like. It kind of evolves as you go through your life. So it looked different, 17 years ago when my son was born versus now. And some of those habits, if I'm not reflecting on that relationship that I had, so if I had like a scarcity mindset in terms of money, so, I'm very frugal and I was kind of living paycheck to paycheck, like a lot of Canadians are. When I had a sale at the grocery store, when I had the money, I was loading up. My pantry is overflowing. And I still find myself doing that because I don't want to be stuck in a situation where I don't have the resources to, that hierarchy of need for survival also exists in the financial side of things as well. So, or even as simple as, are you a spender or a saver? Are you a spender or a saver, Craig?
But it's hard to answer because something you just said there, even though not same situation, but like I find it fluctuates. And there's that aspect. Sometimes I'm like, no, let's save up money and so on. I have a bit and I spend it, or, like without thinking about it, which I think is part of the point. Or sometimes the other extreme is I'm spending money, again, not that I'm only a spender, but it's like, well, I've screwed this up so bad anyways, what difference does it make? And like, I want that thing, so I'm going to get it, because what's another fill in the blank for whatever amount it is?
Yeah, absolutely.
But, just kind of like, okay, who cares? Because this is all messed up anyways. And so like, it just changes even over time, I find, at least for me, is getting good, maybe not so good at some points, and then what is impacting whether I am, not always that I've saved up for something.
I think that, and that goes back to like aligning your values. So one of the key things when I've done lots and lots of reading and things like that about financial literacy and wellness, and one of the things that I noted that I wanted to share was, at a certain point, the quality of people's lives does not improve with more earnings. So we have to ask ourselves, are you living your values in your finances? And that is, I think, something that really resonated with me because everyone, especially I find with that demographic of students that are in post-secondary, it's the more money is going to get me to the place that I want to be, that financial freedom element. And you see it on social media. We live in that era where, quick money, you're scrolling through your feed and it's like, this is the side hustle for you. You can, leverage that.
Buy this $30 guide to learn how to make more money.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm all for those creative ways to improve your income for sure. But I do think that the core of financial wellness kind of hinges on what your values are, because financial wellness to me would look very different to you and the listeners and people watching, those types of things. So depending on where you are in your life. So the financial wellness piece, I think, just touching on what do we typically look at to help people identify what their financial wellness looks like. So creating the budget being the first piece, building an emergency fund, protecting your assets, reducing or eliminating your debt, saving, and then planning for the future. Those are kind of the key aspects, and then it kind of works into those 4 elements of short-term finances, long-term finances, present financial freedom, and then looking to the future. So the relationship with money, I guess, does really come into play in terms of how people feel, like the feelings, emotional money, we call it, right? So like you were saying, Craig, well, I've already screwed up this budget, so I'm just going to buy it. Is that impulse, is that, what emotion is at play there? And have you really sat to identify what that relationship with money and how you relate with money? Sometimes, you hear, we've had hundreds, thousands of students coming through the financial aid office, of course. And there's, we're working through a budget with a single parent who's come back to school. They're going to be a nurse or whatever, a paramedic, whatever that looks like. And they really want to make sure that there's something in the budget for their children to attend extracurriculars, because there's an underlying relationship there. When they were small, they were, withheld ballet lessons their whole life. So that relationship really plays on what their values are when they're building that budget. So it's so important to kind of, it's not a one size fits all. It's really important to make sure that you're accessing resources that are meaningful. So, we find a lot of people getting their information from the internet. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those stats as well. The other piece that I think is really important is the stigma. So I wanted to kind of pose the question is to the both of you, if you can think of a time at any point in your life that someone has presented either an event, an idea, invited you somewhere, and you lied about going because it wasn't in the budget.
Absolutely. Yeah. Weddings are a really good example that comes to mind.
Absolutely.
Sometimes there's a big wedding at a very fancy place, and it's like, well, that's a new outfit. There's transportation there. There's the gift there. Or even dinners out sometimes. Maybe your budget for this week doesn't account for it, but people are having this grand experience on a weekend that you just can't afford.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a little bit different from that, but I've had the experience along those lines, but also where someone has said, but I'll cover it for you. And then there's that stigma of like, no, you won't. No, but I have, right? Like I have the money to pay for this,
right?
Expensive thing.
Yeah. The other side of the coin,
but I'm not then putting my half in. No, there's no half. Like I'm paying your half, right?
Yeah.
And so all that to say, stigmas even under those kinds of things, because at least in my mind, some of the cultural, if you will, aspects of buying things and paying for things.
Yeah. And I find too that people get stuck in that, right? Like, so you might be able to get away with fibbing here and there, but typically we've also, I know I can confidently say I've overextended myself for the purpose of keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, if you've heard that expression before. And we've all met those people too, right? That are living far beyond their means. So what's the problem with that? Why do we do that? Why isn't there some sort of safety in our conversations that would allow you to just say no to unnecessary expenses. It's that stigma. So I would implore everyone to try and make that a part of your conversations when money is involved in making a plan, and being confident and brave enough and having the courage to say, this doesn't align with my ability. It's not in the budget right now. Could we do this? Or you're just simply declining, because I find a lot of times those small expenses really add up. And you still, that again, the other side of that is being realistic in your budget, especially as a student. I saw the digital signage for some of the events that DCSA is putting on, where you could go to Halloween Haunt and get transportation, and it was like 50 some odd bucks or something like that. You want to be able to build that into your budget. It's realistic. It's not realistic for students to sit and all we're worried about is paying the rent and making sure that they're eating. That is also very important, but we're all human, so we should be able to incorporate some type of, and that's where we see, the institution itself is trying to leverage those pieces by making it more affordable, getting a bus and making it a larger event so you could, include lots of people to do that. It's a really, there's a lot of blurred lines when you're talking about money, and it's one of those things that sometimes is just uncomfortable for people. And that's one of the things that I try to emphasize is, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because it is such an important part of your life. It is just as important as, your mental health, your physical health, all of those other pieces. Your financial health also is very important. So with Financial Literacy Month, I was so pumped that you had asked me to come and have these discussions. And I thought it was really, really timely, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that you're talking about today is kind of the idea of debt as well. One interesting study that I came across, and when you talked about kind of the emotional connections, is sometimes we're labeling things as being just bad or good and kind of villainizing all debt. But I came across a really interesting study in the Journal of Happiness Studies, and it found a correlation depending on the type of debt. So it was really trying to emphasize that not all debt is necessarily bad, and then would have a negative impact to our sense of well-being and wellness. So for instance, housing and education was not associated with a lower well-being and lower some of the stress that we've been talking about. Want to guess what debt was associated with stress and a decline in well-being? 2 areas of debt?
Ooh, I'm not sure.
Credit cards. And cards, bang on. And that it was saying many individuals, like you were saying, overextend themselves when it comes to credit and an automobile. But education, it was saying to invest. That's a debt that is well worth investing in long term. Something else that I came across from the Journal of Psychiatric Research examined here in Ontario adults and their level of stress related to debt. 14% said they had no debt, which I was a little bit surprised by. But 29% said they were slightly stressed out by their debt. 20% said moderately stressed. 5% said they had quite a bit of stress to do with their debt. And then 3% said substantial amount of stress related to their debt. So hopefully there's some different resources and some different tools that we can explore if we are noticing some of that stress that's coming with some of our finances.
Absolutely. Lots of resources.
So after our quick break here, we're going to continue to explore this conversation on financial well-being, but diving into some financial resources right here back on riotradio.ca. welcome back to the Wellpod at DC, live from the Media Hub here on riotradio.ca. I need a dollar. A dollar is what I need.
Hey.
Aloe Black sang about the need for money in 2010, and for many of us, we're feeling a need for financial resources. Celeste, what are some financial resources DC students have access to?
Absolutely. I love this question. So there is so many things that are not necessarily DC related, and I'm so glad that I'll be able to share a little bit more in depth what's available in terms of financial literacy and financial wellness, because it's not always about getting the money. It doesn't matter how much you have. If you don't know how to manage it, it's no use to you. So the Financial Aid and Awards Office does offer a variety of services. I will be frank and say that our most underutilized service is financial counseling. We do have a team of dedicated financial aid staff that can meet with students one-on-one to kind of go through budget allocation, how much money is coming in, what's going out, get a snapshot of that financial wellness, get to know the student, what are those values that we're incorporating into the budget, and help them learn more about what that looks like. Of course, we have an abundance of bursaries available, scholarships, our on-campus employment program. We also administer OSAP, the Ontario Student Assistance Program, on behalf of the ministry. So these are all things that they can find an abundance of information on the website about. But I really wanted to highlight one of the financial literacy elements as it's called Enriched Academy. And I wanted to ask either of you if you've heard of it.
I only have heard of it kind of through you and some of the different meetings I've been at when you've been promoting it so nicely. And then I saw a quick little YouTube video explaining some of the background behind it.
Yes, it is. So as DC staff, you actually have access to it as a tool for yourself as well, which is amazing. What it is a self-led program that all Durham College students have access to. And you can learn how to manage your money, crush your debt, get a snapshot of your financial wellness, learn about credit and debt management, learn about, fraud, phishing scams, all of the different pieces of financial literacy. So the first, we've got the first. So that's what it looks like. You can log in using your student number network password. The first image, if you could put up the learning dashboard there, it kind of goes through the different sections of courses rather that have. That's the financial aid website there. That's right. So it goes through, there are 5 courses that are what we would consider the light mastery. Now with that, on the website, the Enriched Academy website, for Financial Literacy Month, the Financial Aid Office is offering 4 $100 grocery cards to students who complete those mastery courses within the month of November. So that's awesome, and students can log in through the financial literacy section of the Financial Aid and Awards webpage and access that. And I wanted to, we just had the online calculator tools up that I wanted to talk about, and those calculators are things that, there you go. So the Crush Your Debt is something that I did want to kind of go into, simply because it does really highlight things that people don't necessarily understand the cost of borrowing and what a small increase in a payment can do in terms of the amount of interest that you're going to pay on a debt. And we see this a lot, students using credit cards to kind of meet their basic needs, or sometimes to keep up with the Joneses. So they still have all the things they want to do, but they're using a credit card and not quite understanding what that looks like. So I made the example. In one of the images, you'll see that I just put in a $5,000 debt. So let's say you have a $5,000 debt on your credit card and you're paying $100 a month. So you can see on the image that if you just paid $100 a month on that $5,000 debt, you will pay $23,000 of interest if you're only making the minimum payment. So that real debt, that $5,000, is actually $28,000. We see this as well with students or anyone really that's taking out one of the payday loans and not understanding the amount of interest that there is accumulating on those loans if you don't pay them back right away. or the rent to own furniture is also another one that I've seen before. So with this example, it would take until April 2091 to be debt free of that $5,000. Wow. So 66 years and 5 months. Now, that being said, if I'm looking through my budget and I can kind of take off, maybe I can find a student discount on my cell phone, I can save some money by shopping on dollar days or going to Freshco instead of Sobeys, something like that, and I can find myself another $50. So if I can find $50, you'll see in the next image is a payment of $150, and just by adding that $50, we're shaving off $19,500 of interest. $19,500 of interest just by adding $50 a month, and 59 years. So that's a huge impact and I don't think that you realize it until you start kind of playing with those tools and really seeing that it is. So back to what Craig was saying, I feel like I've already messed this up. I've screwed it up. So let's just do it. But if you have a tool like this and you're using it to really understand your financial position, you kind of can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes it just takes having, the right resources. And fortunately, Durham College has made it so all of our full-time students have access to this resource, and even as an alumni, so you have lifetime access to Durham College Enriched Academy, which is amazing. So the first 5 courses that are in the program are very much geared towards, in my opinion, a post-secondary level financial wellness and literacy, but there is an abundance of additional resources that may be more relevant in life after college. So it may be saving for a wedding or, a new car or something like that. It could be investment, wealth building. Maybe that's not something that you're thinking about when you're in the thick of your studies, but it could be something once you have, now you're comfortable in your career, and that's something that you want to think about. So you have access to all of those resources, which is incredible.
And I think too, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's like one of those things, if you think about like traditional student, I was sort of your traditional student, graduate high school, go to school. This is sort of the first time. I mean, I think I had a credit card prior to that with minimum balance on it and never used it. Partially that was my very fearful time of using that. But yeah, if you haven't been exposed to it and used it much, you don't, like, you're now stepping into, I'm getting OSAP, I have access to credit cards, and that literacy for starting out is definitely something, at least as I reflect, that would have been huge. When I now look at, my MasterCard or whatever it is has 19.99% interest rate, very different than an OSAP. But if in your mind it's all the same, it's all the same debt, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
But
exactly.
learning about it and realizing that stuff's there is awesome.
Yeah, and just to your point, the article that you had brought up, Heather, the investment debt. So, investing in your future, it gives you an ability to earn more. That's reality. So that is an investment. And sometimes risk aversion can, it's not our friend always. So taking the risk to attend, and we see that a lot. And I did have some data that I could share as well about that. So some students that are afraid to attend post-secondary because they don't know where all of that money is coming from, that risk aversion. They don't understand how the OSAP loans work. They don't understand what resources are available. So to that, OSAP, government financial aid, is definitely what we would consider the building block for many students, because it is designed for post-secondary level students, which means if it takes you a little while to land that into that career that allows you the ability to repay that loan, there are programs in place through National Student Loan Service Center. That's like OSAP's bank. So they're responsible for issuing the funds, and that's who you repay. So if you can't repay, you can apply for a program called repayment assistance, and they will pay your minimum payment to keep your loan in good standing every 6 months up to 5 years. As your income goes up, the expectation to pay goes up. So it is really, if you get a bank loan, and not that sometimes a bank loan is a part of the plan, but there is no program like that. If you're delinquent, you're delinquent, and that, impacts your credit. And those are the pieces. That's where the wellness and literacy kind of all comes together, because it's a kind of a snowball effect, like you were saying, Craig. If you don't do this, then that will happen, kind of thing. And you want to be in a position in life after college where your credit is intact. That doesn't mean you have no debt. Because, that's often not the reality. But you can be in a position to move forward with life after college and have what we would say is good debt, and still manage a credit card and all the different types of things. Again, it goes back to your values around what financial wellness looks like for you. So there's lots of resources. So the government financial aid, there's a budget calculator, and tons of resources through the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. That is a huge resource that we would point people to learn about finances, to learn about the different things that are incorporated into those 4 elements of financial wellness for planning. And then the Durham College Financial Aid webpage. We have a budget calculator that is for students that will go through, how much is your tuition, how much is your rent, are you going to be living on residence? Because, it is important to note for students, budgeting for a student is different than budgeting in life. Because you're getting money, 2 lump sums of money if you're an OSAP funded student, and you got to make sure that you can make that last until the next installment of OSAP, and maybe you're augmenting that with bursaries and on-campus employment. So there's a lot of things happening. And like you said, if you've never done, I'm guilty. I had a lot of new pairs of shoes after, it's just it's a thing, and people go through it. So leveraging the experts. So the financial aid and awards office has the dedicated team of people that can kind of help debunk some of the myths, help with risk aversion, understand what your unique financial plan will look like, and how to help you get to where you want to go in terms of achieving post-secondary goals. Yeah.
And I think that's important, going back to what you said earlier of talking to somebody, because it might be awkward talking to a friend or family member, but talking to somebody in financial aid, right? You were mentioning the payments for OSAP because of income and so on. Like, that's what got me through a long time because of where I was after my time in university. And it was I don't want to say deferment because that's not the word, but they were paying the base value so that it was still in good standing and so on. But I didn't know that, except for that I was in a tight place, and then speaking to someone from the financial aid department at the institution I was at.
It's so important, and like they say, the most successful people don't know everything; they just know who to ask, right? So, and that is so important. And students don't know what they don't know. We don't expect them to know, what services are on campus. But I'm hopeful that through things like this, they'll come to learn that we're the safe place to land in terms of, not knowing. And again, if you didn't have parents that taught you, or sometimes they're the worst teacher, depending on the situation. So who you ask is really important, like you said, Craig. And so you can pay big money to learn these things later after you're forced to, or you can navigate through the resources that are available to you now, and then have that toolkit available through your life, which is so important. And that was something that I was going to ask is who do you ask for financial advice? Like, as an adult, who do you go to?
My bank.
Your bank. A professional. A professional.
Yeah.
And that is difficult. I mean, I see so many students that go to their friends. We have a lot of students that will come in and say, well, so-and-so said this about this, and how do I get that? So it's just really word of mouth, and that can be dangerous. You can get bad advice really easily. So it's so important to be meaningful about where you're getting the information, because it's like doing an exercise improperly and you could injure yourself, right?
Yeah, sure.
In
Great
terms
metaphor.
it's the same type of thing. So it's really important to just be thoughtful about who you're getting that information from.
I only go to my bank now because when I started my university career, there was a time when there was kind of tables upon tables of all the different credit card companies set up near campus. And I had a roommate that was collecting, because if you signed up for a credit card, you got some free stuff. And so they were all happy saying, look, I got this like free t-shirt and I got this free cooler, and you kind of just paid off. They knew nothing about the compounded interest that they were slowly starting to pile up. And so kind of watching that and going, I think there might be more to this. And then having a really great financial advisor when I was starting my loan experience through a bank was like, hey, there's more to this than a free t-shirt. Be mindful. Let's talk about some of these concepts. So I was very fortunate to kind of get a little bit of a peek window into financial literacy. And I think that has well served me building my financial well-being, because like you said, we don't know what we don't know, but companies also don't make it easy sometimes to understand this thing. They kind of razzle dazzle us with free stuff or the quick payday loans. They make it seem really easy and convenient. And when we're in a pinch, sometimes we make those short-term gain decisions, not thinking about the long-term implications.
Right.
And even like you said, like I would say, like we have financial advisor. I do have family members that know a whole lot more about finances than I do, and I'll go ask them questions. But I also know they know what they're talking about, right? And so then there's a big difference between that and, as you said, a friend or even whatever, sibling who's like, I did this.
Yeah.
Okay, but is that really going to serve me in the end versus, oh, I have a sibling who is a financial, whatever, and or at least knows their stuff.
Right.
I see them taking care of stuff well,
Right.
and are going to be able to help me out.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, after this quick break, we're going to maybe have some fun with finances. Follow us back here on riotradio.ca. Welcome back to the Wellpod at DC, live from the Media Hub on riotradio.ca. Celeste, do you have a game for us to play? Are we going to have some fun with finances?
I hope it's a little bit fun.
But before we do, actually, there's a bursary that you wanted to talk about, something to do with the holiday season.
Yes. So we are running a campaign for the food access bursary. So that is all students will receive an email. We'll have lots of digital signage up. There'll be lots of promotion for it through social media. So students look out for that. That should be opening on November 15th, and it will stay open for 2 weeks, and eligible students will receive their funds before we break for the holidays. And the intention is to help assist students with like a meal over the holidays. So that's great, and that kind of goes alongside with the other opportunity through the Enriched Academy. So there's lots of opportunities to get some money before the holidays.
Wonderful.
And so speaking of that, in terms of you're mentioning speaking with someone in financial aid, like how would I go about, or how would a student go about?
Yeah,
connecting
absolutely.
with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're located on the second floor of the Student Services building. Students can book an appointment through the website. So either the financial aid webpage or on My DC, there's a book appointment link, and you'll be able to select a financial aid coach or anyone. So the next available appointment, and sit down with one of our financial aid coaches.
Wonderful. Let's have some fun now.
Okay, so don't hold me to the fun part, but I mean, it's money. How fun can it be, really, right? Okay, so just some Q&A, true, false. There was a lot of food for thought in some of these. So a colleague of mine in financial aid actually had facilitated a research study that included 481 students across the country. So that's where some of this comes from. So one of the questions that they had asked was, have you attended any money management workshops, events at your school or in your community in preparation of attending? How many do you think said yes in terms of percentage wise?
I'm going to say 80%.
I think I'm going to be a little bit more biased just from our conversation of like maybe 50, 60%.
18%.
Wow.
18% actually sought out a money management workshop.
Wow.
That is alarming. So it's really important. And further to that, when I did some digging, one of the questions was, where do you go to get the information if you're not going to these workshops and things like that? So it was interesting, actually, that Craig had said, I might go to a friend, or maybe you won't go to a friend because it might be a bit uncomfortable. 75% of the respondents went to a friend or a family member to get information about their finances, which I thought was really, really interesting. 62% went to the internet.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, is that of the 18% that sought help?
Exactly.
The largest chunk of that was different, not even going to financial aid expert.
Less than 20% go to the institution's financial aid office for that information, which identifies that there's a gap. So some exposure is required, and that's essentially, the intention. That's what we're hoping to achieve by things like this. So it's really, really important that the message gets out that we're available to provide that service, and we can, if we don't know the answer, we can certainly find a reliable place.
And two things that come to mind for me. One is, you're mentioning this is a time that for many of us, we have a lot of mature students and returning second career students, but a lot of our students are just starting this kind of adult lifetime of financial literacy and financial well-being. So, and couple that with, this costs a lot of money with rent and with groceries and tuition. So not only is this kind of a pivotal time where we're on maybe at the first time budgeting and doing some things financially on our own, but we're also about to embark on a very expensive journey. And so when it's only 18%, I can see where the startling comes from.
It is. And it's the reactive nature, right? So they typically will come when something goes awry in the plan or an unexpected cost comes up. So, and that's kind of the financial wellness piece. It's that pit in your stomach, and you provided some stats at the beginning of how people are stressed, how many people are stressed about money. And I think it's one of those things that, usually when there's problems in life, money plays a role in some way or another. So getting a hold of that and learning first can really help mitigate some of those challenges, so you can just focus your energy on on school.
Yeah.
So that's important for sure. Okay, so the next one that I wanted to bring forward was, okay, thinking about the last week, how would you describe the amount of stress related to your financial situation? How many do you think said somewhere between a little to a lot? And how many said none at all?
I would say 75%
Said
that they were a lot, little stress.
Yeah, okay.
That higher category.
Yeah, I would say up there, 75, 80%, maybe even higher.
okay. Did you guys sneak a peek at my page?
No, no.
78%.
Ooh.
78% of them. So of that 78%, one of the pieces that came as a bit of a shock, 18% of those respondents had run out of money at some point in the last 6 months and could not meet their daily living costs. So I think it's important to also note that it's important for students to be advocates for one another. So if you are a student that is familiar with some of these concepts, or you've had a positive interaction with a resource on campus, it's really important to note that to your friend. If you notice, and those things kind of come up in ways that we don't necessarily take note of. They're late for class because they're working a lot, or they're sleeping through class because they're working an overnight shift, or they're starving because they're skipping meals because they don't have enough money. Whatever that looks like, there is an abundance of resources on campus. So, just recently, there are folks at Campus Health and Wellness with the Food Security Toolkit. What an amazing resource for students to kind of look to see how they can meet that need throughout the various places across the college that can help address that need. So those pieces are really important, and that's a shocking stat. And I mean, I think I definitely have been there, where you're a student and it's difficult. Maybe sometimes it was, faults of my own. I was prioritizing other things other than, my basic needs. But it's the reality. So I thought that was a really interesting piece of information.
Budgeting seems like a skill to me, though, right? And so as we're learning about it and we're growing, I like to keep in mind that I don't think they're doing it in a way that's kind of malicious, or
Of course not.
it's really hard sometimes to keep track of all of those ins and outs. And like you said, a cup of coffee on the surface only seems like $2, but when you start thinking how that builds up, then this is where we can start getting in trouble. So each day you're thinking, well, yeah, I can afford this. It's only $2. Then at the end of the month, when the paycheck is done, this is when you might notice that pinch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And in addition to the finances, from a student standpoint, as you said, it's an investment. Well, then I run out of money maybe at the end of the month. Not that that's everyone's story, but now, as you've said, like, I'm hungry in class, I'm distracted, or I'm not going because I need to pick up an extra shift. Well, now, like, the money is not separate, or the only aspect of the investment, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's like now the investment is suffering because I can't put my time into it, and so on. So it's all of what we've talked about here today, right, is important to research and connect about.
Absolutely. That's the trigger to say I need someone else to help me manage this because it's not working. It's not aligned with my values. Things are not working properly. So that's definitely a great point for sure. This one is interesting. So I know how much money I spent personally in the last week. Could you tell me how much, within a couple bucks, how much money you spent last week?
Couple bucks?
Yeah, well, if you're budgeting and you're looking every single day.
And these are students that were asked this?
Yes.
I would say 40% said that they could get it close to the dollar.
Sure.
I'm just happy you're not asking me for a second there. I thought I was supposed to say if I knew how much money, and I was like, I'm not far off of that, whatever, So how many say they don't know, or how many they say they do
Either
know?
or. How many say they do?
Maybe 5 to 10% say they know how much they've spent.
76%.
Oh.
Said they knew. The reason being because they have less in general. So when they asked them, how do you do that? It was more the explanation that comes back to, how do you budget when you don't really have a lot of money, right? So you know to the dollar what you're using. So the students that said no, had more resources available to them.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. But I thought that was interesting because my initial reaction was they won't have, I thought it would be higher that didn't, but no. So that was interesting. Okay, and I think we kind of touched on this. Heather had brought this forward at the beginning. What percentage of adults feel anxious when thinking about their finances? And we already said that was about half. So that's also important and shines a light on how crucial it is that people start considering how financial wellness and literacy plays a role in their overarching well-being. Okay, so a few other things. How many domestic students applied for OSAP at Durham College? How many domestic students do you think are applying for government financial aid?
I would say 6,000.
Percentage-wise?
I would say 60%.
Okay.
I'm going to go with that guess because she's been pretty accurate so far.
That's fair. Okay.
Is that the same? Yeah, no. Read her notes or.
It's actually 80%, over 80%.
Yeah.
Which is huge. So I like to share that information because what it does is hopefully minimize the stigma associated with that idea of self-identifying as a student that might need some help in this area. Understanding finances, maximizing resources, minimizing expenses, whatever that looks like. Because if you're sitting at a table of 10 of your peers, 8 of you have applied for financial aid. So it's not uncommon. So we can have these discussions openly and we can talk about debt and we can talk about how money is impacting our day to day. And that really minimizes the stigma associated with it. So, come visit us at the financial aid office. We'd be more than happy to meet with you. Along with that, if you had to guess in terms of volume, how much loan and grant have we dispersed to Durham College students in the last year?
$1 million.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a hard one. In the last year? Yeah, I'd say more like 7 million.
Over $60 million of loan and grant funding.
Wow.
Yeah, so we are busy. We are busy processing those applications and making sure that the money gets out to students. It is, like I said, a building block in their plan. So there is an abundance of resources available, and that's loan and grant funding. Important to note that the loan is the piece you have to repay, the grant is the free money. And we're happy to sit with you and kind of go through that so students can help understand what their assessment looks like and how to apply it to their day-to-day life.
Two numbers, though, that I'm seeing are really substantially different. 80% are applying for those grants and those bursaries, but only 18% are reaching out for that kind of one-to-one coaching and support. So it's almost like financial aid and awards is so much more than just the OSAP and the awards and the grants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to put it because it's, like I said, it is the most underutilized, and it's too bad because it could really help minimize the likelihood of financial crisis during the school year.
Yeah.
Right?
So reach out and access your financial aid and award services. End of our episode today. Our books, tools, and resources mentioned on our episode today will be on our Instagram account at wellness@dc. Don't forget you can email your questions to be discussed anonymously on air at wellpod@durhamcollege.ca. Next week, we're getting sweet, talking about sugar. You can follow the Media Hub on social media at DCSA Media Hub. Thanks for exploring what it means to be well with us here on the Wellpod at DC, live from the Media Hub on riotradio.ca.